Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And Thomas is going to tell us what we are talking about today.
Right. Today, we're going to talk about legal strategy versus life strategy. And we have both. They kind of run on parallel tracks. But what most people do when they think they're getting a divorce is they run to a lawyer. And running to a lawyer about a divorce is kind of like asking a physician about assisted suicide. Now, that sounds kind of weird. So let me
That does sound weird.
Let me unpack that.
Okay.
So when you reach a stage of life where you're considering that you can't endure the pain, a lot of times what people do is they turn to a physician about ending their life.
Mm-hmm.
But ending your life is, in many respects, a spiritual issue, not a medical issue. You know, a chiropractor could end your life, you know.
Your spouse could end your life.
There you go. Right.
That's what popped in my head.
You know, the wider implications of that decision, your physician can't really help with that.
Right.
But a pastor could help you with that, or
right.
a spiritual advisor.
Right.
In other words, you're turning to a medical practitioner, essentially a technician,
right,
for something that requires a philosopher.
Right.
And the same thing is true with lawyers in divorce.
I think I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah. The lawyer, you know, when I went to law school, we studied appellate decisions almost exclusively. What law school is about is the study of appellate decisions that interpret statutes or interpret laws and precedent and all that. And we try to figure out what the relevant arguments are and what kind of facts we have to establish. And basically we're trying to win lawsuits. That's our ultimate purpose in life. And so if a person comes into my office and says, I want a divorce, the first thing that always pops into my mind is, well, you're going to have to file a petition. Okay.
I thought you were going to say, well, you're going to have to work on your abs.
I'm getting a divorce. Hey, get in shape. You're looking a little flabby.
That's from a comedy routine. I think it's Bill Engvall.
Yeah, Bill.
He's hysterical. He said he came home and told his wife that he went to the gym and his buddy told him he was getting a divorce. And she goes, well, what did you say? And he goes, well, I told him he better work on his abs.
Yeah. But a lawyer's a technician. So
right.
I'm right away listening. My questions are, well, do you have kids? What are their ages? And then
how long have you been married?
How long you've been married? Who was the primary caretaker of the kids during the relationship? Or what assets do you have?
Right.
And I'm writing down all these facts on a yellow pad. If you're watching,
it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
We have so many yellow
lawyers.
pads.
Yeah, lawyers can't do anything without a yellow pad, and it can't be a blue pad
Gray-haired
or
lawyers
a white
can't do
pad.
anything.
It's got to be a yellow pad. I can't do anything unless I can't even think unless I have a pen in my hand and a yellow pad.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there while you're talking, writing things on my yellow pad. And I'm taking these little facts that you're giving me and I'm plugging them into elements of causes of action. Like, okay, child custody, best interest of the child, primary caretaker, stability and continuity for the child, frequent and continuing contact with a non-custodial parent, all these things. And either the fact supports that issue or it doesn't.
Right.
So at the end of the day, at the end of the interview, I say, well, what you need to do is file a petition and a request for order, because that way you can get custody orders right away. You can get before the Family Court Services mediator. And I'm thinking in terms of a legal strategy that's going to win, that's going to terminate the case on terms most favorable to my client.
Right.
Okay, but divorces have two parallel tracks. On the one hand, there's the legal part, which I'm an expert in. And the other track is the emotional piece, which has to do with your family relationships mostly, your relationships to your children. And for my money, that's what's important. But your average lawyer can't really advise you.
But your divorce coach can.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Well, to me, that's the difference. That's a lot of the difference between the lawyer and the divorce coach is, and I think if you have a good experienced divorce coach that has some legal background, like with having been, your paralegal for a long time and stuff like that, that helps a lot when you have somebody that's come from the profession, because they can not only help you with your life strategy, but make sure that your life strategy works in concert with your legal strategy.
Or that your legal strategy works in concert with your life strategy.
Either one. But a lot of times what happens is you have somebody that has a lawyer and they have this legal strategy, and the client's trying to follow the legal strategy, but in the meantime, nothing in their life is going the way they want it to.
Right.
Everything's like falling apart, and they can't figure out why. And
Right.
why it's like trying to pick up, confetti off the floor. It's like you can't, it's like there's too much. And so what you have to do is try to align those two processes.
Right. So I'll give you an example. Just before we started recording, I got a call from somebody who said they were in need of help. And this guy, he's a fella, and he had actually two children with a gal he was living with. They were never married. And they live in some rural part of San Diego County, in kind of a small town where everybody knows each other. And he's from another state.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently one of his family members had some kind of marriage or something, but he left the state and left the kids in her care, and they're separated.
Okay, I'm totally confused.
Okay, so
you just said they all reside in San Diego.
Right, but he went to Missouri on a trip. Okay, just let me start over.
Okay.
All right, so this fella has a child, two children with somebody, and then separates from her.
Right.
There's no court case pending.
Right.
They just co-parent.
Right.
I think he was seeing the kids every weekend, every weekend, Friday to Sunday. So one day, he decides that he's going to take a trip to see his family in Missouri, and the stay was for a couple months.
Uh-huh.
And he left the children in her care. He continued to have virtual visits, but basically mom was caring for the kids while he was on this temporary.
Okay, so mom was in San Diego with the kids, and he went to Missouri.
Right.
Gotcha.
So while
I thought you meant he left the kids in Missouri with her, and I'm like,
No.
I'm confused. If it's his family, how did?
No,
Okay, gotcha.
and this was confusing when he was telling me the story too.
Yeah.
But, so while he's in Missouri, I shouldn't have mentioned the state. I was trying not to.
It's all right. You've said it twice now.
Right. Mom moves with the kids to another state.
Oh.
Don't
tell that state.
Yeah. So mom's now moved to, but it's a state that's near California. It's still
Right.
We're still in the west.
So we're either in Arizona, Nevada, Oregon,
New Mexico, or
Utah.
Yeah, one of those states. Yeah, and so the first thing that popped into my mind was, well, you got to file an ex parte.
It's an emergency hearing.
Ex parte is an emergency hearing that generally occurs the next day after you ask for it.
Right.
And it's very upsetting to find out that you have one of these on calendar. But
Yeah, it's always a scramble.
But one of the grounds for an ex parte is if the other parent takes the child out of the state.
Right.
You can, I said, well, we got to file a petition for child custody and support, or a paternity action, either one. We have to file some sort of action with the court, and we have to ask the court for an emergency order that the child be brought back to the jurisdiction. Okay, that's fine. Legally, that's absolutely correct. That's flawless analysis on my part.
Right.
But this guy has certain life goals that are in conflict with that. For one thing, he's considering moving to to Missouri to live with his family, and he was thinking maybe that he would have the children enjoy their summers there. So right away, and they have a fairly good co-parenting relationship.
Right.
So
and a court filing is going to all but destroy that, probably.
Right. So if I were if he were to hire me and I were to call this person in this other nameless state that we won't mention, and say, "Oh, you have a hearing in Superior Court tomorrow morning."
Right.
And your appearance is required, and I'm going to email you the moving papers so that you can read what this is about. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to call.
Then she's going to go, holy crap, and go find the biggest, baddest attorney she can find.
Right. So basically, you've lit their co-parenting relationship on fire.
Right.
Okay. So legally, what I'm thinking as a lawyer is I got to jump on this, because if he waits, he's being complacent with her choice to move to another state with the children. And, so it's, if I act right away, it's more of an emergency. I can win. It's easier for me to win than if he waits 2 or 3 months and then files it.
Right.
Now,
because then the court goes, well, why didn't you?
Yeah.
Why is it an emergency
Why
now?
is this
But
an
it was an
emergency?
emergency 3 months ago.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if I hadn't probed what his life goals were and what he wanted his family to be like, I could very well have sold this guy on filing an immediate action in an ex parte.
And I think that's what 99.9% of attorneys do.
Right.
But because their job, I'm not disparaging them for that. I'm saying that's their job.
Right.
That's their job, is to figure out how to legally solve your problem.
Right.
To, like Thomas said, plug the points into that.
Yeah.
And figure out if they got a winner. And
Right.
if they got a winner, they're going to try to sell you on moving forward with your case, because they can accomplish the goal that they think you're trying to accomplish in your legal strategy. But you have to dig deeper into that,
Right.
into that life strategy to figure out if you should proceed with the legal.
It's like asking a fireman where you should put the doors in your house.
Right.
Well, the fireman's main concern is getting out of the house in case of a fire.
Right.
So his door placement is going to have nothing to do with how your house looks,
Right.
how the traffic through it flows, what the rooms are being used for.
Right.
It's going to be all about, how do I get out of here fast if my house catches on fire?
Right.
And that's the way lawyers are. Lawyers all think this way.
Right.
It's like we had that case against a very aggressive attorney whose name I won't mention a couple months ago.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know who I'm talking about. It's a case where there's 3 kids. It's a divorce case in which the father had essentially primary custody of the kids, and mom was trying to get more time. And this attorney he went with guns blazing for the ex parte hearing on the issue of parental alienation. And his initial salvo, if you will, his initial firing of the cannons was effective. He got the temporary orders 50-50, so he won that throw, but he lost the war because that inflamed the situation and caused the kids to not want to go.
Right. Right. And then is this the one where mom ended up with like 20% of the time?
Yeah.
Or something, and she's got one kid that won't see her at all?
Right.
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 And,
It totally destroyed the family.
Right.
Because nobody stepped back to look at
right.
the life side issue. They just totally went for the legal issue.
Right. And this attorney does this on every case we've
Right.
had with him.
Right.
Every one. And it's kind of like, why are you doing this? And the cynical part of me says it's because he earns more money.
Yeah.
Which may be true. Maybe he's
or they want to. Lawyers also want to win. I mean, they're very driven Type A people for the most part. Not all of them. You are one exception to that. I don't think you're Type A. I think you're Type B because me and you'd kill each other.
Don't tell them that. They'll never hire me now.
No, but
I know how to be aggressive.
No, I know you know how to be aggressive, but you're not about just winning to win because you want to win personally.
Right.
And I think a lot of lawyers do have that. They just have this drive of like, ooh, I can win this. I can win. I can accomplish something, without really thinking about, okay, you could win that, but if it's going to destroy the family and the children,
right?
What if you might have personally won, but you've destroyed the family? And how many times are you and I sitting over dinner going, I can't believe everything this lawyer is doing that's destroying this family?
Yeah.
We not just this lawyer, multiple times we've had
it's pretty much everybody except us.
Not true. There are a handful, but I can tell you who they are. There are a handful of people that have the same approach that we do.
Right.
But in North San Diego, I can tell you who that is. So yeah, I mean the vast majority of them are, and when you also talk about the money, it's not just the fact that, oh, they earn more money, but you have to understand these law firms, especially large law firms, these are businesses. They have overhead. Right. Their lawyers have a certain criteria, a certain threshold of billing hours and a certain amount of money they have to bring in because they have to cover the cost of the assistants and the buildings and the benefits and the, and all that stuff. Yeah. And so, there is a business aspect to it where they have to earn a certain amount of money. And, that can create conflicts in people over what their motivation is in certain situations.
Remember when we first started teaching, we used to do seminars at community colleges. We did a 3-hour all-day primer on getting a divorce or getting a child custody case going. And one of the things I think we spent the first hour on this of how to make the announcement, how to talk to your soon-to-be ex about having a divorce, and how to lay the groundwork for an amicable divorce.
Right.
And I remember saying, and this was before I had a lot of experience in this area, I used to say the worst way you can find out you're getting a divorce is from a process server.
Right.
That's just, you're sitting there in front of the TV watching the ball game and the doorbell rings. Who the heck is that? So you get up and you open the door and it's a process server.
Right.
Oh, I've got some papers for you. It's your divorce papers. Oh man. That'll ruin your whole day.
It'll ruin more than your day. But people do that because conversations about these types of things are very difficult.
Yeah.
And so as human beings, really, we have a certain amount of avoidance. And so what happens is you think, oh, I can just hand this off to the lawyer and let the papers be delivered and I don't have to be there and I don't have to deal with it and I don't have to have the conversation. Right. And, I think if you're fearful of violence or you're fearful of some eruption, or putting yourself or your kids in danger, that may be the way to go.
Right.
But in the vast majority of cases, you're better off to have, your ex-wife made her announcement in the therapist's office.
Right.
So that there was a third party present, but she
right.
still delivered the
to
news
talk
herself
me down
personally.
From the ledge. Yeah.
Right.
Right. And I think, too, that a lot of times good practice of law, effective practice of law involves taking the initiative. Right. And keeping the other party on the defensive.
Right.
There's a certain amount of that, and that may work well in corporate litigation or perhaps a personal injury case, but it works poorly for families.
Right.
Because when somebody's on the defensive, they lash out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at the way the Russians are behaving in this war in Ukraine. The Russians are on the defensive right now. They're being pushed back, And they're resorting to horrible tactics out of, I think, out of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're creating in your co-parenting relationship. You're creating this sense, oh my gosh, what's he going to do next?
Right.
And when you feel that way, it's impossible to cooperate.
Right. Well, and, you know, when the divorce is happening, and I know this was true for me, and you know, we've talked about this, I know it's true for you too. It's like when that divorce is happening, it's your entire life, right? It hits you everywhere. I mean,
Right.
It hit me physically. I lost a bunch of weight in a very short period of time, the divorce diet, as we like to call it.
Yes.
And I was emotionally a wreck. You know, financially, everything was going to heck in a handbasket.
Yeah.
You know, just the whole thing, you know. And so, you know, physically, emotionally, financially, it's just everything's ripping apart. And so when we go in and we get this legal strategy, or we talk to a lawyer or whatever happens, that legal piece of it, although it feels like your entire world, it's kind of like if you can remember being in high school and you felt like high school was your entire world until you became an adult and got married and had kids. And then you're like, wow, that was just like a blip on the radar. It was nothing.
Right.
But in that moment, high school and your friends and what was going on felt like your entire existence from now on.
Yep.
And I think that's what happens with
Fast
this.
times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah. Dude. But that's what happens with this is you have this just crisis of tearing apart of your world. So you go in and you start having lawyers and all this involvement from the legal side. And in that moment, that feels like everything. It feels like that's how it's always going to be. You're going to be up to your eyeballs in all of this crap. But what happens is eventually these lawyers go away.
Yes.
Eventually. I mean, for most people.
Unless you don't pay them, then they sue you for fees.
But you do have people that have recurrences and end up back in court multiple times every year and all this kind of thing. But for the vast majority of us, you know, you might have a couple hearings after the divorce that involve the kids or something if the kids are really young when it starts. But at some point, all of those lawyers go away, and then you're still left with your life.
Right.
And so if you've given everything over to your legal strategy and to your attorneys, and you haven't thought through how all that is going to impact your life and your lifestyle and everything moving forward, then you've done yourself a huge disservice, because that legal part is the blip on the radar.
Right.
And the long
That's
term,
high school.
that's
in
high
your
school,
analogy, right.
in my analogy. And the life part of it is the thing that's going to be there, that's going to stick, that's going to be ongoing when the attorneys are gone and the kids are grown and the whole thing.
Yeah, we have grandkids.
Yes, I have 4 grandchildren now with my ex-husband.
Yeah, and that's where it's at.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can survive parenthood, grandkids are where it's at.
It really is. it really, really is. And, you know, there's sometimes you have these thoughts like, I wish I hadn't been with this person, or I wish I hadn't done this, or I hadn't done that. And I can remember having some of those thoughts at the time. But I will tell you something, that after my grandkids arrived especially and gave me that different perspective, I don't have that.
Right.
I don't have that wish anymore, because it wouldn't be any of them.
Right.
You know, if it hadn't been him, it wouldn't have been my sons, and it wouldn't have been who I love also, and I'm glad that it was them too. But you start to have more appreciation, you know, as you get older, and that new life comes in. And when I was going through the divorce, I wasn't thinking about grandkids. I mean, my kids were 11 and 15. Mm-hmm. That wasn't even really a thought in my head.
Yeah.
You know, but you fast forward and it's like, you know, it could have not been my ex-husband, but then it wouldn't be any of these people in my life that I love so much. It wouldn't be any of them.
Right. And family life is something you have to build. You know, family life doesn't happen.
Right.
If you have kids and you don't nurture them, they're not, you know, they may not even survive. But if they do survive, they're not going to love you.
Right.
And so you have to build a family, and you have to build trust between family members. And this whole litigation thing is like poison to trust.
Right. It's a trust destroyer.
Right.
Yeah.
So this guy that I advised today, I could have convinced him to. I think I could have easily used fear tactics to get in a retainer into my office.
Right. And that's what most people do.
Right.
Yeah. I would say we take in probably a lower volume over time than most people do because we won't do that.
But I probed the questions. What is? I asked him, how do you co-parent? What is your schedule?
What do you want this to look like?
What do you want this to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And in the broader sense, an ex parte totally didn't make sense for his case.
Right.
And he said, well, thanks. I appreciate it. I've learned a lot from this.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I said, well, if you need to file that ex parte, you call me up.
And he probably will. He probably will because you gave him an honest answer and built trust.
Yeah.
And I find that's true a lot. I mean, I have clients that say to me, I've learned more in 1 hour of coaching with you than I have in a year of having had an attorney.
Right.
Because nobody stopped and thought through how to make your life better, not just your case.
Right. So I guess the moral of the story is don't let your attorney put your life in their box. Force your attorney to put his or her litigation into your box.
Right. Very good.
Hey, that was good.
That was very good. Good thing it was.
Did you
recorded.
get that on video? Yeah. Put that in the clip.
Now we're going to have Dalton sitting over there making notes about what he needs to put in the
Should
video.
put some visual like this like halo or cloud or something.
You still have to watch the whole video to find it. Can you imagine having to watch a video of your parents' day after? Like, oh goodness. Anyway, I'm glad that.
All right. Say your stuff.
Okay, so
this is the legal guy. This is the guy that talks really fast on Spotify and then.
This is not intended to be legal advice. Thomas is a licensed California attorney and is not licensed in any other
state. It's not intended to be legal advice. Your case may be different. You should seek other counsel if you have a legal problem.
There you go. And you should say that. I should make you say that at the end of every video.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so that you get more videos like this as they're released. If you're listening to the podcast episode, please also hit like and subscribe so that you also get notified of new episodes as they're released. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.